She was 23 years old, 5'4", and the men on the tarmac were openly laughing at her. One sergeant muttered, loud enough to be heard, "They sent us a girl." She didn't flinch. She pulled on her leather gloves, adjusted her goggles, and climbed into the cockpit of a P-51 Mustang, one of the most powerful, temperamental fighter aircraft ever built. Within minutes, she was gone. A silver streak swallowed by the morning clouds. Those men never laughed again. This is the story of Second Officer Margaret Maggie Calloway, a WASP pilot whose classified Ferry mission in the fall of 1944 took her straight into the teeth of a German intercept over occupied France. A mission she was never supposed to be on. A mission that was never supposed to be dangerous. And a story that was locked away in military archives for decades, because the Army Air Forces didn't want anyone to know a woman had outflown, outthought, and outmaneuvered a Luftwaffe pursuit over hostile skies. They wanted to bury this story. But Maggie kept a diary. And this is what it said. Before we go any further, stop and think about this. In 1944, women were not allowed to fly combat missions. They were not armed. They were not given parachutes on every flight. And they were officially classified as civilians, meaning if they were shot down or killed, their families received no military death benefits, no honor guard, no flag-draped coffin. They flew anyway. Maggie flew anyway. Margaret in Calloway was born in Dayton, Ohio, in 1921. The same city where the Wright brothers had first dared to believe men could fly. She liked to say that wasn't a coincidence. Her father, a crop duster with a beat-up Stearman biplane and more optimism than sense, took her up for the first time when she was 6 years old. She never came back down. Not really. By the time she was 17, Maggie had her private pilot's license, paid for by 3 summers of waitressing tips. By 19, she had logged over 300 hours of flight time. When the war broke out and Jacqueline Cochran began recruiting women pilots for the newly formed Women Air Force Service Pilots, the WASPs, Maggie didn't hesitate for a single second. She wrote in her diary in August 1942, "They say women can't handle these planes. They say we're too emotional, too fragile, too soft for war flying. I've been flying since before most of those boys shave for the first time. Let them laugh. I'll be in the cockpit while they're still reading the manual." She graduated from Avenger Field in Sweetwater, Texas, in February in 1943, one of 1,074 women who earned those silver wings. She was assigned to the Air Transport Command's ferrying division, tasked with one of the most quietly essential jobs of the entire war, delivering brand new warplanes from factories to air bases across the United States, and in some cases across the Atlantic. By October 1944, Maggie had ferried over 60 aircraft, B-17 Flying Fortresses, P-47 Thunderbolts, C-47 Transport. She had logged nearly 1,500 flight hours. She had never once scratched a wing on delivery. And then came the orders for Mission Calloway, 44. Here's what the official mission record said. A routine ferry of a single P-51D Mustang from a maintenance depot in England to an airbase in liberated France. No combat, no risk, clear skies. Here's what the official mission record left out. The route would take her within 20 miles of the German front line. And someone in the Luftwaffe's radar network was paying very close attention. October 19th, 1944. RAF Buttonwood, England. The air smelled like wet grass and engine oil. A cold front was pushing in from the North Sea, and the men in the operations tent were arguing about whether to scrub the day's flights. Maggie didn't argue. She pre-flighted her Mustang with the methodical calm of a surgeon. She checked the fuel, full. The oxygen system, good. The engine, a Packard-built Merlin V 12 that sounded like God clearing his throat. She ran through her checklist twice, climbed in, and taxied to the runway. The operations officer, a major named Henderson, jogged out to wave her down. He had an uneasy look on his face. "Calloway," he said, "the weather window is narrow. Are you sure you want to take this?" She wrote later that she looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Major, I've flown through worse. And that plane needs to be in France by tomorrow morning." Henderson stepped back. She throttled up. What Maggie didn't know, what Henderson may or may not have known himself, was that German signals intelligence had been tracking unusual ferry activity along the English Channel corridor. A Luftwaffe intercept squadron, JG-2 Richthofen, had been repositioned to a forward base near the Belgian border specifically to pick off isolated Allied aircraft, lightly armed, alone, and easy prey. They were hunting strays, and Maggie Calloway, alone in a plane with no radio escort and no wingman, was about to become one. 20 minutes after takeoff, she crossed the French coast at 18,000 feet. The sky ahead was a cathedral of cold blue silence. And then her mirror caught a glint of sunlight off metal. Two of them, coming fast from the east. In her diary, she wrote just 4 words for that moment. "Oh Lord, here we go." The 2 aircraft were Focke-Wulf 190s, the Luftwaffe's most capable fighter in 1944. Fast, heavily armed, and flown by experienced pilots who had survived years on the Eastern and Western fronts. Against a lone, unarmed ferry pilot in a Mustang, the math was brutal. Maggie later wrote, "I knew I had one advantage and one only. The P-51 was the best long-range fighter in the world. Those boys in the Fw-190s, they were working from forward base, running on limited fuel. If I could keep them chasing me long enough, they have to break off or risk not making it home." She firewalled the throttle. The Mustang screamed forward at over 400 miles per hour. The 2 German fighters split, a classic hunting formation, one high and one low, trying to bracket her. Maggie didn't climb. She dove, hard and fast, trading altitude for speed, pushing the Merlin engine to its absolute limit. The airframe shuddered. The altimeter unwound like a broken clock. One Fw-190 overshot her in the dive, passing close enough that she could see the black crosses on its wings. The other was still behind her, closing. She didn't panic. This is what makes Maggie Calloway's story so extraordinary. There was no panic in her diary. There was a calculation, fury, determination. She yanked the Mustang into a tight left brake, the kind of violent, high-G maneuver that trained fighter pilots practice for months. The pursuing Fw-190 couldn't follow the turn radius. It overshot wide, and then she ran. She hugged the treetops at 300 feet above the French countryside, pushing north, then west, using every valley and ridgeline to break the German pilot's visual contact. It was heart-pounding flying. Telephone wires flashed past. A church steeple blurred by. She later estimated she was pulling the Mustang through maneuvers that her aircraft technically wasn't certified to perform alone. Maneuvers she had watched fighter pilots practice and memorize from the ground, never once imagining she'd need them. 8 minutes into the pursuit, which felt, she wrote, like 8 years, the Fw-190s broke off. They had reached the edge of their fuel range. They waggled their wings, a pilot's gesture that across every sky in every war means the same thing. Well played, and turned for home. Maggie climbed back to altitude. She took a long, shaking breath, and then she flew the last 90 miles to her destination in France, landed the Mustang perfectly, and delivered it without a scratch. When she climbed out of the cockpit at the French air base, The ground crew could see that the Mustang's engine cowling was streaked with oil from the hard running. One young mechanic looked at her and said, "Rough crossing, ma'am." She pulled off her goggles and said, "A little bit of turbulence." She never told them what had happened. Not that day. The full account wasn't known until Maggie's diary was donated to the National Air and Space Museum archives in 1987, 2 years before her death. She had never sought recognition. She had never gone on talk shows or given interviews about that October day in 1944. When a researcher finally read the diary and cross-referenced it with declassified Luftwaffe squadron records, the encounter was confirmed. JG-2's operational log for October 19th, 1944 recorded a pursuit of unidentified Allied aircraft. Target evaded. Intercept unsuccessful. They didn't know they had been outflown by a 23-year-old woman from Dayton, Ohio. When Maggie was interviewed late in her life, just once by a small aviation history journal, she was asked how she had stayed calm during those 8 minutes of pursuit. She thought about it for a long time. Then she said, "I wasn't calm. I was terrified. But terror and paralysis are not the same thing. I've been taught that the airplane does what you tell it. So I told it what to do. And I trusted my hours. I trusted my training. And I trusted that I'd earned the right to be in that seat, no matter who laughed." She was awarded no medal for that day. WASPs were civilians. They weren't eligible for military decorations. It wasn't until 2010, 66 years later, that the United States Congress awarded the women Air Force service pilots the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian honor in America. Maggie Calloway was 89 years old when she accepted hers. She wore her original WASP wings on her lapel. Her hands shook slightly as she held the medal. Her eyes did not. The WASPs were disbanded in December 1944, quietly, without ceremony, ordered home with nothing but a bus ticket and a thanks for your service. Their records were classified for over 30 years. The Army Air Forces didn't want it widely known how essential these women had been, because admitting it would mean admitting they'd been wrong about what women could do. 38 WASPs died in service to their country. They were buried without military honors. Their families paid their own funeral costs. But here's what history cannot erase, and what every classified file and locked archive couldn't keep hidden forever. These women flew over 60 million miles in service of the United States. They ferried over 12,000 aircraft of 78 different types. They freed thousands of male pilots for combat duty. And on at least one October afternoon over occupied France, one of them, alone, unarmed, and unafraid, outflew the best pursuit pilots the Luftwaffe could send after her. They laughed at the lady pilot until they couldn't keep up. The greatest generation had many faces. There were the GIs on Omaha Beach and the Marines on Iwo Jima. There were the medics in the Ardennes and the submariners beneath the Pacific. But there were also the women who strapped into cockpits and flew through storms and enemy skies, for no medals, no recognition, and no guarantee that anyone would ever know their names. Maggie Calloway knew her name. She knew what she was worth. And she left us a diary, so we would know it too. Somewhere over the fields of France, on a cold October morning, a young woman from Ohio told her airplane what to do, and it listened. And history, slowly, finally, has started to listen too. If this hidden diary gave you chills, smash that like button right now. Drop a comment. What do you think really happened out there in those 8 minutes? Or share your own family WW2 story below. We read every single one. And if you want more Untold Diaries from the front lines, subscribe to Untold WW2 Diaries and hit the bell so you never miss a single hidden story. Thanks for watching. Their courage lives on through us.